All right, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be jumping into the foreign exchange market problem set. I'll have a key sent over your way, but we're just going to jump right in. No need to linger. Mexico discovers huge reserves of oil and starts exporting oil to the United States. Describe what effect this would have. Well, there are two things we know right off the bat. Mexicans are getting wealthy, but if they're increasing their exports, the only way they're going to increase their exports is if other people buy a peso. In order to get at that huge reserve of oil, these people need a peso. So I can actually tell you right off the bat that the peso to US dollar is going to appreciate. Why? Because Americans now need pesos to get some of that super sweet, cheap oil. You know how much Americans love oil. So the nominal peso to US dollar exchange rate will appreciate. This also means that the dollar relative to peso will depreciate. But the answer to this question is appreciate. Let's talk about some of the things that will happen. Mexican exports of other goods and services. Well, their currency is appreciating. So now their other goods and services are more expensive. So I know their other goods and services are going to decrease because technically they're more expensive to the rest of the world. So Mexicans are more wealthy. Of course, their things are going to be more expensive to the rest of the world, which is going to make their exports and other goods and services decrease. What about the imports of goods and services? That will actually increase because if Mexican is making all this money and their wealth is going up and their currency is appreciating, then suddenly their currency can buy more stuff in the rest of the world. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. We're going to meet really soon, and I apologize for having to do this on a video. What a crazy day today has been. But I'm really going to try to make these videos super fun, super engaging, move through the material really quick. If the value of a euro, which is the currency for most of Europe, goes from 1 euro costing $1.25 to 1 euro costing $1.50, this is the true definition of the euro appreciating. This is the definition of the euro costing more money to Americans. So this is the true definition of appreciate. If the value of that euro happened, what's going to happen to French exports? Well, I'll tell you, if that euro is more expensive, Americans are really sensitive to the price. So it will not be more easily afforded by consumers in the US. It's quite the opposite. It will not be cheaper. It's quite the opposite. It will definitely not be unaffected. It's being made more expensive. So we're definitely going to see that French exports coming into the United States cost 25 cents more, guaranteed per dollar. That's kind of how it goes. 4. If the value of a US dollar changes from being 120 yen, pretty awesome, to 110 yen, less awesome, it follows that, well, this is the picture of the yen doing something. What is happening to the yen? It's becoming less expensive for Americans to buy. That's the picture of depreciation. That is the picture of depreciation. Let me check my key really quick. Oh yeah. You know, we're having a good time. When I gotta check my key. We are back because we're recording this screen. So what is going on is now US goods are becoming cheaper for Japanese consumers to buy. Ooh. This is the picture of depreciation. So the Japanese yen is depreciating and the US dollar is appreciating. You can get more, you get fewer yen per dollar. No, US becomes, so sorry for the quick contradiction. When I check my key, it always makes me a little bit nervous. US goods are becoming cheaper for Japanese people to buy because they can get a single US dollar for fewer yen than they could previously. They could afford US goods less expensively. So this isn't necessarily the picture of the Japanese yen depreciating because the Japanese, they required fewer Japanese yen. So in technicality, this is appreciation. I was speaking way too fast. The answer is kind of in T. So another way we could tell is if the Japanese yen did depreciate, Japanese goods would become cheaper for US people. This isn't necessarily true because now a dollar gets them fewer yen. So a dollar actually gets you fewer US goods. So A and C I was able to eliminate because they're essentially the same exact thing. US services become more expensive for Japanese firms. That's another bit of the same exact thing. And US exports to Japan would fall. Why would US exports to Japan fall? Now they can afford, they get an extra dollar for 10 yen. So, B definitely has to be the right answer. 5, if the US dollar appreciates relative to currencies in other countries, so if the US dollar goes up, the dollar is more expensive for other people, then US imports are going to go up because we could afford more things, and our exports will fall because they will technically be more expensive. So US imports will increase and exports will decrease because our dollar is so much more expensive in the rest of the world. If the demand for British pounds in the United States, this is literally the definition for appreciation. This is the definition for appreciation. If British pound demand goes up in the United States, then the pound is appreciating. So it's not the US dollar appreciating. It's not the pound depreciating. It won't change the supply of dollars. What it will do is it'll increase the price of the pound per the dollar. It's the dollar price per pound that would be increasing because as demand goes up, it will take more US dollars to buy a single British pound if demand rises. So if demand rises, it will take more dollars to purchase a single pound. So the US dollar price of the British pound increases. The way to kind of write out the exchange rate. So let's use the graph below to answer question number 7. From D1 to D2, the change that would occur if everything else was equal, what would cause demand for quantity of US dollars to go up in Europe? Why would Europeans want more US dollars? I'll tell you why. Interest rates are higher in the United States because Europeans are going to want to put their money in dollars. If the value of the dollar increases, then they'll take more euros per US dollar to ever hit that level. Number 8 says, as the balance of payments in the financial account, we'll kind of have to talk about this, but I'll tell you one thing right off the bat that I do know. If the balance of payments on the current account increases, they have to equal out to 0. Then the financial account has to decrease. Now, another weird factor of this question is this idea that if the current account increases, the current account considers our trade situation. The only thing that would cause the current account to go up is if we started exporting. Essentially, if we started getting money for the things we sent off to other countries. So if we start exporting, we know that the US dollar is in a very specific situation. That the US dollar, if we're exporting, if our current account is rising, that the US dollar must have appreciated. US dollar appreciated because we were receiving more exports than imports. Americans were becoming wealthy. There was demand for our currency. The demand for our currency came from people trying to buy our stuff. If we're exporting things because people are buying our stuff, that is the thing that put pressure on our currency to appreciate. Suppose that the US and the European Union are the only trading partners in the world. If the US lowers import restrictions from the EU, I'll tell you, if it becomes easier for people to get stuff from the EU, we would honestly expect that people would want euros to start buying some of this stuff from the EU. So that would increase the demand for euros, and effectively any increase in demand in another country is the definition of appreciation. If Japanese buyers demand more US dollars, well, that's the definition of appreciate. If Japanese buyers demand more US dollars, the dollar appreciates. Because the yen is the only other thing we're dealing with, we know that one depreciates. The US balance of payment on the current account. So if people are demanding our dollars, then they're probably buying our financial assets. If that doesn't make sense, I'll try to have the ACDC econ sent over to your way so that there is the opportunity to try to understand it at that deeper level. But for the sake of getting this assignment done, it is really worth stating that the US balance of payments, the current account, is going to fall. And that means that the financial account, because it always does the opposite, will rise. So I'm just going to go ahead and circle the answer here and then just double back and talk about it. Japanese buyers demand more US dollars. That's the definition of appreciation. The inverse always happens to the other currency we're dealing with, depreciation. The US balance of payments on the current account has to deal with our exports. So if the current account deals with exports and our currency appreciated, suddenly exports are more expensive. Any appreciation in the currency forces exports to fall. So that's how I knew the current account would fall, but I also knew the financial account would rise, not just because they have to be opposites, but also because if the United States dollar is in demand, the way people tend to get dollars is by investing in US financial assets. So it's also just kind of a caveat testing thing. Because the balance of payments record all of a country's international transaction. We kind of talked about this before. There's a such thing as the current account and the capital account. The current account is one and done things, while the capital account tends to be financial related transactions. So certainly if the United States buys chocolate from Belgium, that's the current account because it's a one and done thing. Now, that is a credit to Belgium because Belgium got the money, and that is a debit to the United States. I don't know if the teacher's asking you those questions yet, but they will definitely come up. If a United States manufacturer buys computer equipment from Japan, well, this is still the current account because it's not like he's buying a financial asset. He didn't buy stock in the company. That would be a financial asset. He just bought a thing. That's the current account. And it would definitely be a debit to the United States, and it would be a credit to Japan because they got paid. Let's move on to part B. How would an increase in the real income in the United States affect the current account balance? Explain. Well, this is kind of a fun question because if income increased in the United States, then people are going to start demanding things from other countries. That's fundamentally how it tends to happen. So how would this affect our current account balance? Well, if right now our account is balanced because we're exporting how much we're importing, this would decrease the current account because we would start buying stuff from other countries because we're wealthy. Kind of simple as that. The next question uses a graph, so that'll be a little bit more complicated, but it's as simple as that. If our income goes up, we're going to start demanding more imports. If we start importing more than we're exporting because our income would rise, the current account would decrease and the financial account would increase invariably. Using a correctly labeled graph of the foreign exchange market for the United States dollar, show how an increase in the United States firms' direct investment in India will affect of the value of the dollar relative to the Indian currency. So the value of the dollar relative to the Indian currency would be drawn as just the exchange rate of the rupee. So we'll just draw one out, maybe for the opportunity to see it. This is the exchange rate for the rupee. This would be the quantity of loanable funds. We have a supply of rupees, and we have demand for rupees. So taking this in kind of piece by piece, if the United States firm is directly investing in India, that's definitely a shifter. So we could kind of take it piece by piece. We could draw some lines in here. The supply of rupees and the demand for rupees are what's changing. So if there's an increase in United States firms' direct investment, then those US firms are demanding a new level of rupees. The US firms are the ones who are demanding it. Now, sometimes there are double shifters. Certainly, that would take away the supply of rupees on the goods market. But I think for the context of your class, they're only looking for one shifter right now. And then how will it affect the value of the United States dollar? I could tell you, if people are demanding to invest in India, the rupee is appreciating. That's the movement we saw over here. But if we're talking about the dollar relative to the rupee is depreciating. And let's see if it actually makes sense. If United States firms are hurrying to invest in India, then we know they're not hurrying to invest in America. So the rupee is the hot bargain. The rupee is appreciating because it's in demand from these United States firms. This also means that the United States dollar is no longer in demand by United States firms. So that is functionally why the dollar is depreciating. I hope these videos are kind of helpful. I'm going to have the third one up very, very, very soon. Thank you so much for your patience, and I really apologize for the craziness of the day.